Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential.
Hello and welcome back to episode 28 of Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin. I am your host, Jason Podolin, and today I had a conversation with Steve Passmore. Now, this guy, as you'll see, is a beauty. He really is. He's fun-loving. He loves a laugh. He loves to get a laugh. He loves to laugh at himself. He just likes to have a good time. Now, that does not mean this guy was a jokester when it came to playing, because he was one of the fiercest competitors that I ever had the privilege of playing with, and seeing him on the ice as well. He was fierce. A small goalie for his era. Of the time, 5'9", not a tall guy, not a big build, but really athletic, really aggressive, and really dynamic. And he comes on the podcast today. I turn on my camera, and there Steve is with his goalie mask on and his Chicago Blackhawks jersey. That just gives you an idea of Steve as a guy. He was so fun to have in the room. And we go over a lot of things, what it was like to be a small goalie, what that's like now in the league now, where it's gone to size, and if we'll ever get back to seeing some smaller guys between the pipes. We talk about the position and far as superstition and routine and where he fit into that mix. We talk about what it takes to be a backup goalie in the NHL and what is your role. And we talk about understanding your role as a player and really how to stay in the league as a role guy and grow from there. We talk about his time in Kamloops with the Blazers, where he went on to win a Memorial Cup, win the league MVP honors of the playoffs for the WHL, and some of the amazing players he played with there. Steve was a professional by all stretches of the imagination. He played a lot of years for a lot of different teams: IHL, AHL, East Coast League, NHL, over in Europe, in Germany, and in Italy. He saw a lot of the world. He played the game right. He lived the game. He lived the game right. And I hope you enjoy him and the conversation that we had, because it is a reminder to me that this sport, the people you meet, the idea behind everything we do is that it should be about having a good time and having a smile on your face. So I hope you enjoy my conversation here with NHL goalie Steve Passmore.
All right, welcome back for episode 28 of Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin. And today we have on an old buddy and an ex-teammate, Mr. Steve Passmore. So, Passy, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I can make the cut.
Where's that mask, man? When we were off camera here before, just so you guys know a little bit about Steve, this is how Steve showed up when his face came online. Full on Chicago goalie mask and his jersey, like a true goalie. So he opted not to do the whole interview in the goalie mask, but I thought that we should be able to appreciate it because that's pretty special.
Well, with COVID right now, everybody should be wearing masks. So I don't know how protective this is, but it worked all right through my career.
So good. Is that the one you wore in Chicago?
That's one of them. You know what? I got a new one every year. I always did, just because I got sick of the paint job, so I'd always have a new one.
Right. That's actually cool. Let's talk about that, because goalies love their gear. That's all. I mean, I guess players love their gear too, but you guys get to be a little more creative about it with your pads and your glove and blocker and specifically your mask. Was that always something that you took a lot of pride in?
Absolutely. I had one painter from the time I started junior till the time I retired. Frank Cipra was my painter. and we would collaborate every year on the on the paint job, and every year I got a new mask.
Cool. Was that whether you're in the show or whether you're in the minors?
Didn't matter.
Yeah. And was that on your dime?
And I never asked the team either. I just assumed they paid for it. I don't know if they did or not.
Oh, I was just going to say, so you don't even know. You never paid, but somebody did.
Well, I'm assuming somebody did. I hope somebody did, but I got to every year I would just start talking to Frank, and I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I never actually asked where the invoice went.
That's funny. Well, Frank kept talking to you. Maybe that's a good sign, but maybe you owe Frank a call and just to check up.
Well, you know what? He's a Facebook friend of mine.
Well, there you go.
Because isn't everybody?
Is he still doing that? Because now I got the goalie in the mix. Maybe we'll have to do that for one of his birthday presents one year.
I don't. You know what? I honestly don't know if he's still doing it. I hope he's retired by now.
Right. How cool would that be, for a young goalie to get a little custom paint job on the old mask?
That'd be pretty sweet for sure.
That would be sweet. So Steve, this I know some of the guys have been on it. I think you've listened to a couple episodes, but we try to. I love having different players on, different paths on. You were somebody that was unique in the sense that set some records in junior. Got to play on like really two different ends of the spectrum, really, as far as teams were concerned. And then had the typical, I would say, battle of like minors to the show and trades and what is a pro hockey player, and I think that those sort of things don't get talked enough. And I know we got a lot of young listeners on and a lot of parents that are trying to navigate the sport. So I just like shining some light on some of that stuff, right? Like what it's like to be the person who's got the mask on, and what that means and what that meant to you. So I would like to start back in junior because the first thing I'm going to bring up, which I love bringing up Hockey DB, is your 10 games in merit. Can we go there, because I love the stat line, man. You had a 6.38 goals against average, and somehow you ended up in the WHL. So how did that all work?
Well, actually, the funny thing is I started out in the WHL that year in Tri-Cities, and I was 16, and they gave me the starting role, and I was awful. Like I just wasn't ready at all.
Right.
So then Tri-Cities cut me, obviously, because I was terrible. And then I went down to merit, and obviously, as the stats show, I was no better there. Right. So I got cut so I went from the starting goalie in the WHL at 16 to ended up going back to actually Victoria. My mom was living in Victoria at the time. So I went WHL, got cut, went to the tier 2, right? The junior A, got cut from there. I actually went back and I played a year of midget in Victoria because I had nowhere else to go. I needed to play. And we ended up having 3 goalies on this midget team in Victoria. And actually it was funny because as it was, I went down there and, you kind of get your ass handed to you, and you're humbled quite a bit. You went from WHL to midget, and so ended up going there, turned the team around. We took the team to the provincial. We won everything, went to the provincials, and then not bragging, but they ended up riding me. I ended up playing really well, and we got to the provincials, and then we get to the provincials, and our coach turns around and goes, okay, everybody plays equal time now. Like it was the most ridiculous thing ever. I played the entire playoffs, won, had a great playoff. Then we get there, and now everybody's going to get even ice time. And we just got shit kicked in provincials.
Wow.
Yeah, weird year. But you know what? And it was funny. It really was a career-changing year for me. The owner at the time of the Tri-City Americans said that I was just dog shit, and
Who was that at the time?
It was
do you remember?
I can see him. I actually used to drive with him when I was 15.
Okay. Who's the
I
coach?
can't remember his name,
Yeah.
but he actually came out in the press and said that I was just terrible and I would never play in the league. And they traded me to Victoria right away.
Right. So they traded you to Victoria
Yeah.
before you kind of went down to BC to the JHL.
No, they traded me during the year. I think I was in midget at the time, and
gotcha.
but they just came out and they're like, "This kid's terrible. He's never going to play in the league." Which I think I've got some records that'll stand in that league for a while. So,
no kidding.
I somehow made it back.
Yeah, that's wild though. I mean, because your story's not the only one like that. I mean, I remember Kevin Sawyer comes to mind, like cut from 3 different BC junior A teams, like ended up playing like only 18 games all year, had no idea where he was going to go. 3 years later, he's in the NHL. Like it's so crazy, right? Because at the time, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, you're probably not feeling good about yourself. You think it's the end of the world. Like you said, your tail's between your legs. You're coming home back to midget, and like you probably didn't have aspirations at that point of being like, yeah, I'm going to be an NHL goalie one day.
No, but you know what? I think it's funny. I think a lot of what we go through, and you were talking about young kids watching this and listening, and I think a lot of what we go through as younger hockey players, it's either going to make you or break you. Like it really is. And it's your choice. It's your decision of whether it does make you or break you. But it adds to the fun stories down the road when you get old and fat, right? Like that's what we get to talk about. But it is funny when you look at it and you were 16 and I could have hung it up, right? And I see a lot of these young kids now, and the adversity sometimes it breaks them, and I think that shows a lot about. I think it makes you a better player down the road for sure.
What do you think kept you going? Like, was it one thing that comes to mind whenever I think of you, Passy? A smile comes to my face because you're fun. I classify you as fun. You're a good guy to be around. You get people laughing. You had a good sense of humor, and you always had fun on the ice. I mean, not only when we played against each other, and you were competitive as hell. Like, let's be honest. I mean, you were a fierce competitor, but you had a way to enjoy that competition that made it fun, even, for someone like me who was trying to score on you. And then when we were playing together in Mannheim, you made practice fun. Like, do you think, like, was fun kind of always an element for you, that you just loved the game so much that you were going to persevere through something like that? I
love playing. Like, I just love it. It's and I love being on the ice. It's, to me, and like you said, I was competitive, like super competitive, but to me, I always played the game between the whistles. And then when the game wasn't on, I'd check out the hottest chick in the stands, or, laugh and joke or sing to the song that's on. And that was my mental break, I guess, like my release. But yeah, you know what? The game's so fun, and being around the guys is so much fun. If you can find a way to turn on and off your competitiveness, I think it's really going to help guys. It helped me anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's I wanted to get into that, and I mean, I guess we're into it, so let's go there. But you mentioned goalie is unique in the fact that there's a hell of a lot riding on you and your position, more so than any other player on the ice. Like anyone who's been around the game understands that. Me as a right winger can have an off game, and we still have a really good chance of winning that game, probably because there's 19 other guys in the ice. I mean, Steve Passmore has an off game as the goalie, and that really changes the odds quite substantially, which means that there's a hell of a lot riding mentally. I mean, there's more of a mental side to that. I think that's more so than for other players, because there is the pressure and there is the requirement of being focused and being ready. How do you think that you fell into that idea of figuring out that you were a guy that worked well with not being as focused, between whistles or maybe between periods or whatever the case may be? Like, did you have to figure that out, or was that just always kind of the way you knew you operated best?
No, it's funny. And I think all of us as pro hockey players, you had to figure out how you performed at your best, right? And not everybody's the same. I was always considered the non-typical goalie, because, like some goalies, you didn't talk to them day of the game because goalies are retarded, right? Like, they're just weird. And I was the quote unquote normal goalie because I didn't go into a cocoon. I didn't, I laughed, joked, had a fun time. And that's how I found I performed the best. Some guys decided that, you couldn't talk to them because they were so focused. Maybe my brain, I couldn't be focused for 3 hours straight. Like it just didn't work for me. So I focused when the puck was dropped. And then I found for me, I needed a break and I needed to look at the stands. I needed to find out what was going on, see who was around. And then I could focus again once the puck was dropped. And like I said, I think I tried being ultra focused. I tried being the guy that, didn't talk to anybody, and it just didn't fit my personality. So I just went back to having fun.
Yeah, I hear you. I can relate to that too, because I felt that the more serious I tried to be, the less effective I was, the less authentic I kind of was with the game, because it really became less fun. Like me chirping you or you chirping me after, I scored, or you would stop me or whatever, or we're in the crease and you're giving me like that, to me was fun. Right. I mean, and there was an element that, that there was a seriousness to it, but there was also, a unique element of like, yeah, we're enjoying this, on different ends of the spectrum. And that's what I think, for players just listening, right, is like, there's like, when you're in that dressing room, right, how many different styles and personalities are there, right? And that's one of the beautiful things about that room, is when you find that dressing room where that's actually allowed and encouraged. It's kind of a special place to be, because everyone has their own way of going about it. And you have your own way to kind of shine within that space, which is pretty unique.
Yeah. And you learn the guys you don't talk to, right? Like in that dressing room, it's a microcosm all shrunk down, right? So you learn the guys that you don't talk to, and you don't bug Bob over there because, well, that's the way he gets ready for a game. But Pods and I will go and shoot the shit and joke around, and that's how we get ready for the game. And it really is fun to see whose personalities are in that dressing room. And and like I said, you mash up some people that you want to go, and you can see this group over here going, okay, we can be serious on the ice, but we can't be that serious in the dressing room.
Yeah. Did you find
some coaches love it, and some coaches, it drives them insane?
That's funny, because I was just going to say there, because that's what I said about like being in an environment where it's encouraged or allowed. It wasn't always the case, right? Because there could have been like, we don't need to name names, but like, well, I can. Brian Maxwell, for instance, like Brian Maxwell, he was a great coach, very respected coach, taught me a ton, but he had a very old school mentality about how every single person was supposed to get ready for a game. And that was with this very, like, a burr up your ass, he'd call it, and you're serious. And if you walked in and somebody was smiling or before a game, like, it was actually like massively frowned upon.
Well, I had Sutter.
What's that?
I had Brian Sutter. I had Sutter in Chicago.
Right.
And he walked around with just like that who farted look all the time. Right. And just angry. And would walk around the dressing room and he's got this furrowed, and he expected everybody else to be the same way, because that when he played, that was his I'm getting ready for a game, right? I got to be angry, I got to hate everybody, kill the other guy kind of mentality. And he expected everybody to be the same way. He and I did not get along because of that. Because I'd laugh and joke and I like to have fun, and it's like, oh shit, okay, we're going on the ice, cool, let's try and do something fun out there.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't deal with that, so he and I really didn't get along.
So you were comfortable enough in that scenario, because I mean, I have talked about that, like the relationships, and like they do matter, like how that coach feels about you, matters. Were you were you comfortable enough just to kind of stay the way you were? Did you find yourself trying to change a little bit, or at least in his presence to succumb to what he thought you were supposed to be?
I couldn't do it because when I tried to be serious, I was terrible on the ice. So what do you want? Do you want me serious in the room and shitty on the ice, or do you want me having fun and being better? And I don't think I was the backup goalie. Every 3 weeks you get a little tap on the ass and it says, boy, you better go out there and be good for one game, because you're not going to see the ice again. And I actually went into his office. I remember the one year we're playing and we're like 8 games in. I still haven't seen the ice yet. And so I went into him and I'm like, hey, so what am I doing wrong? Like how do I earn a start? And he's like, oh, Pass, I love you. You're doing great. You know, like keep working hard in practice. I'm like, okay, am I not working hard enough in practice? Because I don't know if you noticed, but it's been 8 games and I haven't seen the ice yet. He's like, no, you just work hard in practice. I'm like, well, I'm the first one on the ice. I'm the last one off the ice. You know, I'm like, how can I earn a start? Don't give me one, but I want to earn it. And he's like, no. So it was kind of funny because on one hand, he said that he liked me. And then on the other hand, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if he did or didn't, but we definitely didn't see eye to eye for sure. And I didn't change the way I was in the dressing room, and I would never do that because I tried doing the serious thing, and it wasn't my personality.
Right. As a starter compared to being a backup, and especially in the biggest league in the world, the NHL, you know, there is a different, I mean, it's a massively different role, right? The expectation level is different. What your job is, you know, I mean, of course you want to get the starts, like you said, on a personal level, and I'm sure you think you can help the team and everything else. You want to be in the pipes, but did you have like a conscious decision of, yeah, well, I am in this support role. Like I do want whoever it is, Tebow or whoever was in front of you, to play well and to make that life as good as you can, and also be there for your other teammates. You know what I mean? Like did you start thinking that as a support backup guy, or were you trying to get that number one job yourself, or a little both?
Your job as a backup is tell jokes and play cards. Like that's your role, but it's an important role. Don't get me wrong. But as a backup goalie, you're there to make sure that, you know, you're the guy that everybody gets to shoot high on in practice. Right. Like everybody gets to buzz the tower every time. That's your collarbones and your head are the main target. Right. But that's your job. Like your job is to make sure that when you get the tap and you get to go in, you're ready. But other than that, I mean, it's stay late after practice. Make sure, you know, you're playing 2-pass with all the other black aces and the assistant coaches. Yeah. Make sure you're the light guy in the room and make sure everybody's having fun. And it's definitely a different role. When you're starting, you go out, you take as many shots as you want, or as few shots. For me, it was as few shots as I want. I started in the minors, obviously more than in the show, but literally I used to go, when I was starting in the minors, I'd go up to the coach. I'm like, all right, I'm going to be on for about 20 minutes today. I'm going to take 2 drills and see you later. I'm out. Right. Whereas in the show, when you're in the backup, you're like, okay, I'll be on for about 2 hours today. Right. I'll take about 450 shots and I'll go ice down after. Yeah. Just very different role.
And we don't have a choice. As a backup, you have to do it, else you're not going to be there. I mean, like, one, right? You mean, like, that's definitely the spot you're filling. And then 2, I like the fact of your, like, I going back and thinking about the goalies that I played with that were like in the backup role. They were all great guys.
But you have to. That's your job.
That's what I mean, though. I mean, there's no mistake, right? Because if you're not a great guy, why are you there? You know, like that's my thing, is like the Glenn Healy, you know, I mean, yourself. Oh, geez. Well, you and Cristobal, you guys weren't bad. I mean, you're at different stages of your career, but like really good guys. Like and I think that's like a prerequisite. The longer you wanted to stay around, I mean, if you were a jerk, I mean, somebody else can fill that role, you know?
Right. But I think that comes down to a couple things, though. You've got to, you have to know your role on a team, and whether it's first line, fourth line, fifth line, like know your role and do well at it. And if you don't if you're a backup goalie and you don't know you're a backup goalie, you're not going to do your role well. Right. Like if you got the stink eye and you're pissy that you think you should be getting more starts, or just know your role. right? If you're a fourth liner and your job is to kill minutes on the clock and give the first line a rest, but don't get scored on, like that's your role. Do it, have pride in it. You're as important as that first liner on the team. Like as a team, you can't build a team of all first liners that want the puck all the time and they want to be on the ice all the time. It just doesn't work. Edmonton tried it, right? It didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the way the mentality of the hockey team is it's building a puzzle. Right. And if you're the backup, know you're the backup and just be good at that role. Yeah, you might get a few more starts, but you're a backup. Let's be honest.
And how do you balance that now between having higher aspirations and wanting more? Because there's nothing wrong with wanting more and trying to be something else while you're doing that one role well. I mean, I know as players have a lot of hard time doing that too, because you could be in that third, fourth line role and think you really are a PP guy, right? So I mean, I never tell anyone that I work with not to aspire to do that, but you do have to own what you're doing at the time, or else you're going to lose that job in a hurry.
You know what? 100%. And there's nothing wrong with wanting more, but let your play do it. Don't let your attitude do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, I think that's the thing. If in all honesty, so I was in, we'll go back to war stories. Like I was in LA, and I got hot. Like I was the backup in LA, no question about it, but I got hot for a bit. And my longest ever streak, I started 6 games in a row. But you know, what was funny is my partner, who obviously I'd taken over his role for a little bit, right, would sit there in the dressing room and bitch to me how he was getting fucked over by management because they weren't playing him. And I'm kind of right. And I'm sitting there going, dude, you're kind of complaining to the wrong guy. Like I'm the guy playing. I'm pretty excited about it. Go get anybody else in the dressing room, but probably not me.
Right.
Right. But that's the example though of he was a starter with a starter's mentality, but not a good guy. That couldn't step aside and go, all right, well, for right now, this is the way it's going to be. And then he couldn't switch into the backup role at the time. Like wouldn't stay late, wouldn't, still had the wrong mentality. So sometimes on a team, your role is going to shift. But I think what makes a good teammate is shifting into that role graciously.
Yeah. I've had some conversations with some other goalies, and it sounds like whatever side they were on of that coin, whether it's the starter or the backup, or even if it was in like a 50-50 split situation, like everyone seemed to do better when there was somebody that you wanted to go to war with, like that you generally like the guy that you were playing with as a partner, genuinely wanted him to do well, and you felt the same thing when you had the pipes. Can you speak to that as well? Is that?
Well, it's like you mentioned Thibaut. So I was Thibaut's backup for 5 years, but legitimately when I went and played, he wanted me to win. He wanted me to do well. When I got another start, there was nobody more excited than him when I got another start. Doesn't mean that he didn't want to be in the net, but he was legitimately, we were friends. He legitimately wanted me to do well and succeed. And I did the same for him. Right. So I think there's, I do think that's good. That's you want your partner to do well. Whether that means I don't start for another week. Okay. Well, kick some ass while you're in there. But it was always good that we could pick each other up.
Right.
So that is a big thing. And I've played with guys that wasn't the case. And I can name names of guys that we just didn't get along. Whether it was, and it wasn't a competitive thing. It was just because obviously in different leagues, and this, you've got different rules. When you were in the minors, you were a big deal, right? When I was in the minors, I was the starter, and when I went up to the show, you have to adapt. When we were in junior, we were pretty good. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you have to adapt your mentality. You have to adapt your role. You have to adapt your personality, not your personality, but your your approach, let's say, right? Because you and I both know when, like you go from a first line guy in junior who's just pure offense. You're a goal scorer. Well, then you go to the minors and you're like, oh shit, there's a whole lot of us like that, right? Because you take the top two lines, let's say, from junior, and you move them up, and they move up to the A, and then then you whittle that down. Now when Pods goes to the show, you were what, third, fourth line?
Yeah.
Right. And you have to adjust. And I think the good players adjust. I played with some guys that really weren't a big deal in junior, but they found a role and they played that role to a T. And 11 years later, they're still in the NHL, and there's guys looking at him going, how is he there? He wasn't that good, but he found that role and he played it well.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that topic has come up more than once on this podcast with different guys. And I remember specifically Scotty Nickel speaking to it.
That's the exact guy I was thinking of.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Because he's like, I was saying, I mean, growing up as a young minor hockey league player, and you're having all these aspirations and watching the NHL and all these guys, the NHL to me was where the best players in the world played. Like all the best players were in the NHL, and that is true to an extent, but it's not true, as you just said. Like we all have a different idea of what the best hockey player in the world is too. So for me, it was like, a skilled guy that could skate, that could score, that was like a talented player, right? Like that was the best player. But it's pieces to a puzzle, as you say, and that player doesn't fit well on a third, fourth line job in the NHL, right? If he maybe there's some choices maybe that player has to make, maybe they can, maybe they can't, but right, that's where this other guy comes in now from junior that you're like, what? That guy wasn't that good of a player, but he'll go up and down the wall and get the puck out every single time, and he'll run somebody over in the forecheck and get off the ice after 35 seconds, and he'll do that for 10 years, right? And like he finds his spot.
It's so funny you say Scotty Nickel, because when I think of a guy that chiseled himself out a career, and a good career, I don't mean that with any disrespect to Scotty. He was a teammate. I thought he made chicken soup out of chicken shit, right? like he really did. He found out his role was to kill penalties, win a few faceoffs, kill time, and like you said, never be a minor.
Yeah, be an agitator.
Yeah, he threw his body around with reckless abandon.
Yeah.
I don't think he would lose a battle ever on the wall or for the puck. But if it was the last 2 feet before that blue line, it was going to get out. Yeah. Like that was just a given. It would get out. And I think that was a guy that literally eked out a career. And I applaud a guy like that wasn't going to be flashy, but you know what? Next year he was still on the roster.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a guy too, he almost had, I think he did have 100 points in junior. I mean, 100 points in junior, I think he had. He said he realized, going up to the AHL even, that he realized that he wasn't going to be that guy. There's too many of those other guys. So then he found himself in this role, and then to be there for however long he was, 7 years in the minors, essentially without really a sniff of anything. And then all of a sudden he makes the Flames. He never comes back. Like 600-700 games in the NHL he had, like absolutely awesome. And he just said, yeah, he owned it. He owned what he was. He helped young guys too, like, because he was an older guy. So he helped those young guys out. He was a good guy. Very similar to what I was talking about with being a backup goalie, right? Like you're that fourth line guy now in the NHL, and you're 30 years old. If you're not a good guy to the younger guys, if you're not a good guy in the room, you're gone instantly, right? Like, of course you have to do some good things on the ice because it's a results-based league, but that's where your personality comes in, and how you are or aren't with other guys in that environment matters a big time. And I mean, that's the best thing about Scotty. I mean, I just think he's just such an amazing dude, right? He's always just been a great guy. And which is why he's still around and doing what he's doing. I mean, it's fun to be around. He cares about people, and he competes.
But if you look at, so what a lot of people that don't come to a team or have never played or never been in that dressing room, there's certain guys, and don't kid yourself, they kept a job because they were a good guy in the room. They were a good teammate. Like you said, help the young guys, do this or that. I think, in all honesty, I probably kept a job longer than I should have, talent-wise, because that was my role. I knew my role. I knew, like I said, tell jokes, play cards. That's your role on the team. Every now and then throw the pads on. But, legit, there's pieces to a puzzle. And I think a lot of people that don't, that have never played, don't quite understand that fourth line guy that constantly, shoe checks you, and right, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
How many fourth line guys do you know that there could be anybody that could fill that role, but they keep them around for a reason.
Yep.
I'm out here from the podcast to remind you and thank you. Please review, subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. Do it. I dare you. It totally helps. I appreciate everything that you're doing. I appreciate those of you who are listening. I appreciate those who are choosing to spend time with me and my guests because you're finding value in the podcast. And if you are finding value in the podcast, that means that others would probably find value in the podcast. So if you do your part, we can blow this thing up. That's all I got for you today. We'll bring you back to the episode. Thanks again.
Exactly, 100%. It's the people side of it that's beyond the skill set of the athlete. I mean, your skills are going to get you there and everything else, but I mean, it is your people skills that keep you there. I think that's a big thing, and helps you stay. When I want to pull it back a little bit to goalie again, because one, I have a goalie in the house, and I've now coached younger goalies, and I've seen it happen even at the pro level, and it's the comparison game. And it's that game of, at the youth level for sure, is like, what is the other goalie doing when you're spending time and comparing yourself just in that bubble, right? Well, they didn't do well, so that means I'm better type attitude. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe not that way, but you can talk about that however you want to, right? But like really comparing yourself to that goalie in practice, right? Like their level of work ethic means if you outwork them by this much, right? Even though they were the lazy person on the ice, that you're a hard worker type deal. Like how do you frame, like, did you ever get caught in that, or how did you deal with that on an internal basis of like having that other goaltender there that does want the net, that is want to stop pucks, that is at practice, that you're seeing on a daily basis? How do you deal with the comparison side of that?
I think that's almost a dangerous game to play, right? Like, because again, as we've talked about through the whole show, is everybody's themselves, right? Like everybody excels different ways and everything like that. So I think it's actually, it almost becomes dangerous. It's like you comparing yourself to another winger, but you got a different skill set, right? You got to be careful. You got to drive yourself to be the best you can, and not necessarily gauge it on the other guy. Like you said, if I outwork the laziest guy on the ice, well, am I the hard worker? Nah, I'm just second laziest.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
So I think that's almost a dangerous thing to start doing, especially at a young age, because like you said, if the other, if every other winger is every other left winger is a slug, and I'm just the best left winger, but I'm not getting any better because, well, those guys were the shits anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. You can get comfortable. And it's that growth mindset versus fixed mindset, like where I've really dug into that more in recent years, and not as much when I was playing, unfortunately, but just the idea that like somebody else's success doesn't diminish you, and vice versa. Somebody else's failure doesn't make you any better, right? Like you said, that's where I think that danger can step in, because you don't want to wish, like you said, Thibault, I'm sure you don't want to wish him to have a bad night just so you can get the net. You want to earn your way into that spot, right? And like having that mental shift, I think is important, because it's a healthier spot to live in when you're competing against yourself, and and still wishing and celebrating other people's successes.
Yeah, and it's one thing, the more you push yourself, you shouldn't have other people having to be the reason you're pushing. Try and push yourself, and again, because I think when you if you're using the other person as a gauge, either you're not going to work as hard as you should, or you're going to find yourself actually hoping the other person has to fail for you to succeed. And that's not going to do you any good in the long run.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. Let's go back to Vic. So we talked about you starting and try getting cut from Merit, going on to the provincials at midget, which turned out to be a great year for you and kind of a defining year, right? Where you had to go through this adversity, and spoke about that many times in the show, how that does define us. You categorize as make or break you, and you decided to have it make you, and you end up, if you find yourself back in Victoria. And the rookie year, I want to talk about that second season, because that's the one, that's the one I'm sure you've been asked about before. But for a goaltender to play 71 games out of 72, 4,200 minutes, 2,500 saves, is insane, right? I mean, that like you said, like I don't even know how that can be broken, if it will ever be broken, especially in this day and age. I think that's one that'll stand forever. Like was the backup that bad? Were you that good? Like, well, how did that work?
Dave Hamilton was my backup. Poor guy. Right? Like so I was having a good year for sure. Our team was terrible. Like, we were awful. The puck got in our way. We were good at fighting. The puck, not so much. And I remember it was just, I don't know. I think I just kept starting. And then I remember we went to, we were in Spokane actually. And it was right before, it was in December. So the kid gets his first start in December, right? It was the one and only game I didn't play. So we, and I mean, you played against us. You remember how bad we were. I think we averaged about 50 to 55 shots against a night. That was the average. And so we go to Spokane. And Dave Hamilton's going to get the start. This is his first start of the year. It's in December, which isn't fair either, right? Like, you imagine sitting there that long and then all of a sudden getting the tap on the ass going, all right, good luck.
Right. So
we go to Spokane after being on the bus for 12 hours. This kid gets the start. We only give up 33 shots. I remember this. We only gave up 33 shots that night. We end up losing 9-3.
Ouch.
And like 33 shots out, like for me, I'm like, that'd be like a night off.
Right.
Right. And so I remember the coach is just kind of comes back to me and he's like, kid's never going to play again. I'm like, oh shit. Okay. So sure enough, we ended up, he got cut. We bring in this other guy to back up, and the other guy never saw the ice all year. He sat there and just was shooter tutor dummy in practice all year for the rest of the year.
All year. 71 games.
71 out of 72 games. That'll never be broken. I can honestly, they say there's a lot of records. You can never say it won't be broken. That won't be broken. I'll guarantee that. I'll stamp that right now.
Yeah.
And I remember I went to the coach. We had about 10 games left in the season. And I went to him and I just said, hey, listen, I'm like, there's one thing I want to get out of this year. At least let me get the record. I have to play the rest of the 10 games. I'm like, let me take something positive out of this year. Let me get the record, because the record was 70 at the time.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's surprising.
And he's like, oh yeah, for sure. Because there were days I'd come to the rink, we'd get finished a game and the coach is like, I don't want to see you at the rink tomorrow. Like, just don't even show up. Don't come. Don't practice. You're playing all the games, so I don't even want to see you.
That is wild. Yeah, I mean, to have a coach that would do that, to have a backup that would, not play, for you not to get injured, like for all those things to happen is, like I said, it won't happen again. So that's 71 games, and that must have been like, were you just in a groove? Like, like how did your body and mind handle that much hockey?
Well, I mean, players do it, right? It shouldn't be. If I would have had the Ironman, that would have been cool. right?
Yeah.
Could you imagine all 72 games? Right?
You
Like,
could have, right? You were physically fine that game that you didn't play.
what's that?
You were physically fine the game you never played, right? It was just a start
Yeah,
for
it
him.
was the only game I sat on the bench.
Right.
And actually it was funny because in the 71st game, which was the record breaker, I ended up getting kicked out in the second period because I took Tyson Nash's teeth out. So
who was your teammate like the next year?
The next year is my teammate, but I took his bottom row out that game.
What do you get so upset about, Passy?
What's that?
What were you so upset about?
Hey, I got the record. I'm out. I'm done. See you guys.
I think Nash should be the first one to say, I'm surprised you never hit my nose.
Oh, yeah, right? How did you miss that target?
I have him on my list too. I want to interview Nasher. He'd be a fun guest.
He's a beaut.
Yeah.
For sure. He's a beaut, but how he got a TV job, we have no idea. He's got a face for radio for sure.
There we go. We got to chat about that. So you play on what I mean, I don't even know what the record was that year. You guys weren't good, like you said. You end up going, you're in Victoria again.
That year, I think I was 15, 55, and 1.
Crazy.
I'm not kidding you. I think if you DB it, I think I was 15, 55, and 1.
And that year too, though, was your draft year, which was interesting, right? Because again, 15 wins and 55 losses doesn't necessarily look good on the back of a hockey card, nor does really your goals against average was almost 5, right? I mean, aren't great numbers, but boy, every scout in the world got a chance to look at you.
You know what? And it's funny because I got scouted. I had a lot of scouts that year watching, and you know what? When your stats are that bad, but you're the first star majority of the nights, right? And our team was terrible, but I was always one of the top 3 stars of the night. Even though you got your ass handed to you, right? Whether you won or you lost, it's like, okay, well, he put up with it.
Yeah. Who can we give it to on Victoria? Goalie. Give it to the goalie. He got shell-shocked.
You know what's funny? Because we went on our Eastern swing that year, which was always a grind. So we played 9 games in 11 nights. I lost 12 pounds on that trip. So I ended the year at 153 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Right. I remember we were in Regina. We gave up 32 shots in the second period. Like that's a game.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
Right. So the scouts, I think at the end were just looking at me going, okay, well the guy, we had the tryouts. Remember Christmas was for the World Juniors, right?
Yeah.
And I'd gone that summer and done the summer camp in, where was that, Windsor? I can't remember where it was.
I don't remember either. I don't remember going to that. Oh, I did go to it. Where the heck was it? Yeah, it was out east somewhere though.
It was out east somewhere because I went to the summer camp and it was the top 2 goalies there were me and Manny Legacy. And then I went back to junior and obviously was having the year I was having, but we were just losing. And I remember one of the Hockey Canada guys came up to me and he's like, so we're not inviting you in like for the winter camp at Christmas. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, he's like, you were the top 2 goalies in summer. And he goes, but we can't justify, he goes, from a media standpoint, we can't look at your stats. He's like, we can't justify that.
Right.
And so I was crushed. I was actually really pissed off because I'm like, I'm standing on my head. I'm having an incredible year. I know my stats don't look that good, but I'm, come watch me play. And I'm putting on a show every night.
Yeah.
And literally the guy from Team Canada said, he's like, there is no way we can justify those stats to you showing up to camp. I was like, oh shit, that sucks.
Yeah, that does suck. That's too bad.
Right. But I get it. Could you imagine? Well, with a 4 goals against average, let's bring this guy to camp.
Right.
I know all those guys with those 2 goals against averages we left at home, but let's bring him.
Yeah, no, I know it's tough for them, tough for you. I mean, as a player, obviously, you're just doing what you can, and doing your best every night, and all you want is an opportunity. And that is such a big tournament to play in, to have a chance to represent. I mean, that's the holy grail when you're that age, right? It's the coolest thing to be able to do.
I think I had 95 penalty minutes that year too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you were feisty, that's for sure. But you play in 71 games. Yeah, that's only a minor here and there. That's not.
I think I had 5 fighting majors that year though.
Good for you. You needed a rest. You needed a break.
Right?
Hey, what happens for a goalie with a fight? You don't go to the box. What do you do?
No, actually, so funny story. So one of my NHL fights actually fought Kluche, and same thing. He was having a bad game. They were down 3-1, and there was a little scrum in the corner, and he looks at me and gives me the shake, and I'm like, sure, why not? Right? Yeah. So we went, met at center ice and fought, and there was no other fight. So literally, you pick your gloves back up. He got talked out because he gave me a dirty shot after the refs came in.
Yeah.
So he got 10 in a game, and the ref starts taking me to the bench, and he's like, "You're out." And I'm like, "Nah, I'm going back in net." So literally, you just put your gloves back on and go back in net.
Then someone has to serve your 5-minute major.
Oh yeah.
They should stick you guys in the box. That'd be hilarious. I'd love to see that, all your gear on.
Funny though, hey?
Yeah, that'd be funny.
Can you imagine coming out though and having those big pillows skating out?
Oh, that's great. Okay, so let's go. So then let's fast forward, because technically we haven't even touched your pro career yet, although we've talked about a ton of stuff pertaining to it. But going from Victoria, like where you're getting bombarded, to going to a perennial powerhouse in with the Blazers and the star-studded lineup that they had every year, must have been just a massive culture shock, really. Or was it? I don't know. I couldn't imagine going to different ends of the spectrum there in the same season. What was that like, changing from Victoria to Kamloops?
It was like getting paroled. Like legit. It was funny because I came to Kamloops, and I remember my first game. I came up here, drove up from Victoria, and we played Prince Albert my first game. And we ended up winning 2-1. And everybody's like, "Oh my God, you had such a good game." I'm like, we had 21 shots. Like, that was it. We won 2-1. We had 21 shots. It was, every night was like a night off. It was so different. But then the mentality, like you said, you go from basically bottom right from the basement to the penthouse.
Yeah.
And it was just, the attitude in the dressing room was so incredible. It was just, every game you're just like, well, we're going to win. I don't know how we're going to do it, but you you just knew you were going to win every single night. You just went out, and your mentality and your mindset was just, yeah, we're going to win. I don't know if we're going to pull it out in the third period, if we're going to blow them out in the first, but we're going to win regardless. We just know.
Well, you had the exact, I mean, like you said, you had 15 wins as a team, I think, in Victoria or whatever it was. And then you had 15 losses in a season with Kamloops. Like, the mentality, like, one spot you're learning how to lose, or accepting how to lose, or however you want to do it. And the other spot, like, it's just like you said, like, the feel before the game is you're finding ways to win. You're going to find a way to win instead of finding a way to lose. Like, I don't think anyone would be able to speak to that with such definity as you, like, from being able to see that from one year to the next, like what that must have felt like.
It was different. I went from, so when I was in Victoria, it would be trying to take little positives out of the game, like, because you knew you weren't going to win, right? But you still had to take things out that made yourself feel good about your game, right? So whether it's like, I'm going to be first star tonight, or whether it's going to be, okay, this save or that save, or, but maybe I'll try and keep them under 5 goals. Like, that was like there was, you try and take little positives out of each game. Whereas, like you said, in Kamloops, it was just, you're sitting in the dressing room, you're literally going to be like, okay, well, we're going to win. It's just, that's a given. Let's see. I don't know how we're going to do it tonight. Maybe, maybe Tucker will have 2 goals, maybe, but we'd have so much fun on the ice. Yeah. My favorite defenseman ever playing with is Scott Ferguson. We had so much fun together, and that was a guy that legitimately we could joke around and have fun on the ice. And that's why he's my favorite, always will be. So there used to be a scoring system in Kamloops. They used to rate you 1 to 4 on how your game was. So literally we'd be joking around on the ice and he'd make a breakout and make a play. And he'd literally turn around, he'd take his glove off and he's like, that's a 4. Shit like that. It was so loose. And I think that's where in Kamloops, I think I learned to really enjoy being loose and having fun in the game, because it was just fun. I think we went 33 home games without a loss.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
It's bonkers. It's bonkers. And I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, that's what, like I mentioned Brian Maxwell already this episode, but like some of those, and there's more than just him, but like winning was fun. Like it was meant to be fun, and losing was meant to be miserable.
Yeah.
Like it was, downloaded into you, right? I mean, they would show up at practice and you said like that who's farted face, like that would be everywhere after a loss, after 2 losses, or God forbid you lost 3 in a row, right? Like it was so miserable, and there'd be so many fights at practice, and couldn't talk on the bus, and you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that, right? But if all of a sudden you pop the champagne bottles if you start winning, right? And everyone's allowed to have a good time and be loose. And so it was definitely entrenched in, at least in Spokane, in our organization there, that winning was what you're supposed to do. And when you're doing what you're supposed to do, now you're allowed to enjoy the process. And you better not be having any ounce of a good time when you're losing, because that's not why you're here.
No, absolutely. And I think I think juniors definitely, and I know this is, sounds like old manish back in my day, right?
Yeah.
But legit, it was definitely a different time. When you talk about like practice fights, I've never been on a team that had more practice fights than Kamloops. Like in Victoria, we had no practice fights. We didn't give a shit, right? Like the competitiveness wasn't, because we just lost. Yeah. Right. It's not that the guys were bad guys. We were just outskilled every night. Like we were, we just didn't, it was a knife to a gunfight every night. And it's not that the guys didn't care, but then you got to Kamloops and practice was so competitive. We had practice fights all the time. It's not that the guys didn't like each other. I've never been on a tighter team in my life, but you competed because, like you said, you didn't want to lose anything. You didn't want to lose a battle. You didn't want to lose a drill. I remember we used to, we'd have PP and PK practice. We took so much pride as a PK shutting them down. Like we would chirp each other nonstop when you stopped them. Like you'd ice the puck and you wouldn't stop beaking at them. Right. But that's what made us better. Like that's that competitive spirit in practice. It carried over into a game, so that if you're not going to let your buddy beat you, you're definitely not going to let the opposition beat you.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I think that there's a healthy way to do that. And I think that the game is evolving a little bit within that, to have that competitiveness, but not have it be so black and white. Because again, I think it's hard. It's hard to play your best when everything is so stoic and serious and you're supposed to be miserable, and now you're supposed to go out there and free flow and actually win a hockey game. Like it doesn't, the two don't really add up. I can understand that you're not supposed to celebrate a losing streak, but there's also a way where you can be your best player in a high performance environment that needs some level of, latitude, a little bit of looseness, right? A little bit of freedom. And I think the game is starting to embrace that a little bit from the coaching side, which is nice to see.
Well, I think so. But I think a lot of that comes from the creativity of the players now. They're pulling shit off in games that Maxey would have killed you if you pulled off some of those moves in practice, never mind in a game. That they're trying them in a game, and it's, you would have got two-handed in practice if you would have done that. And so I think they're embracing the creativity. And these guys, don't kid yourself, these guys are way better than we ever were back at our highest level. The skill level of the players today is through the roof.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense because they're working on it all the time. From a young age, I remember I was just thinking that the other day, actually, because my son my sons are, into hockey, and they like doing what they can do to get better, even though they're young. Like they're still out there, whatever, shooting pucks, or they're running, or they're doing these different things. And I worked, and I'm sure you could say the same. I worked my ass off in the summer, but it was always in the physical realm of the sport. It was like doing bench press or doing dry land or that type of stuff. Like I never shot a puck all summer. I wasn't doing toe drags on my plastic shooting tiles. You know what I mean? I wasn't working on hands. Like that was kind of like a thing where you kind of, in our day, you sort of had it or you didn't. I was a skill guy. I had good hands. I had soft mitts, and that was the way it was, right? And if you didn't, you didn't, because no one was working on their toe drag or their backhand toe drag or the Michigan or, none of that stuff was going on when we were playing.
No, like you said, you'd be running your lines. You'd be, doing it, whatever you could physically. But yeah, you never worked on the skill aspect. And now it seems like that's all they work on is the individual skills. And it shows. You watch them on the ice, even, you even watch warm up. It's a new level. It's funny when I look at them now, I'm like, I can't believe I played in that league, because I wouldn't be able to now. There's no question. For one, there's a height thing. I don't think you can be under 6'2" and be a goalie now. So,
you know what? I still want to talk about Kamloops Memorial Cup, because that was a big time for you. But since you brought that up, you're 5'9"? 5'10"? 5'9"?
I wish I was 5'10".
Yeah, like, did you identify? It was a different time, for sure. So, you weren't the smallest goalie of your era by any stretch of the imagination. There were smaller guys, but did you identify as being an undersized goalie? Was that ever like a thing for you, thinking I'm small, I got to do this better than somebody else?
Yeah. Well, the big thing is I couldn't play like the bigger guys did, right? Like I couldn't just go down and hope to get hit, because you'd miss me every time. Mm-hmm. So, I really had to work on my skating. I had to be more acrobatic, I guess. Just because I couldn't make, I watch these big guys now, and they never come out of that blue paint. Like they don't have to, because they're 6'8", right? Like, but I could never, my whole thing, I could never be in that blue paint because you just weren't going to hit me. So I definitely had to be a better skater, had to be probably more, I had to work more on my reflexes and my flexibility and my speed. And I worked on moving the puck. I worked on my stick handling and my actual puck movement, because I had to bring something to the table that other guys didn't have. I wasn't gonna be in size, so you had to bring an attribute. And like you said, Scotty Nickel learned how to kill penalties. I had to learn how to move the puck better than anybody else.
Right. Do you lament over that a little bit? Like, meaning, because I do watch these guys and they're so precise. Like their movements are so precise. I don't know what everything is. It doesn't there's any wasted motion out there, right? Like everything's with a purpose. It's to a spot. It's down in the butterfly, but kick, slide over, got the rebound. Like it's robotic almost, right? And the athleticism in the goalie position, I guess, is what I'm getting at, seems to be a little bit gone. We're not seeing as much of the. There's still some guys like Fleury likes to throw some athleticism in there, and there's some guys that can flare it up a little bit. But the bigger guys are really, really regimented, I find. Do you think that's missing a bit, or do you think that's just the way it is? Or are these guys maybe that athletic plus they're big? I don't know, and they don't have to move around as much.
Yeah, I think maybe a bit of column A, column B. Yeah. But when you're 6'7", how are you not getting hit? Like, that's what I look at. I sit there and go, okay, I was 5'9". I had to jump around in there and, do cartwheels to get hit. These guys I'm like, how do you let in anything? Right? Like the gear's gotten better. The gear's ridiculous now, how light it is, how, like you said, when they go down now, their pads are just flat. Like they just look like 2x4s on the ice, right? Like nothing's getting through. But I think that's part of the reason why now that they do move the way they do is their gear allows them to do it. Back when we played, our gear wasn't, it was making strides, but it wasn't quite where it is now.
Sure.
And I think they're so big now. And they are. I think they're athletes. They're probably better athletes than we were, because the goalies were meant to be fat and out of shape.
Right.
But so I think it is a bit of column A, column B, if that's the way the positions evolved. I mean, hockey's evolved, but definitely the goaltending position has evolved too.
But I think it's sad because like I talked to more than one person in the sport, and I won't name names in this scenario because it doesn't matter, but like specifically said that they're not even really allowed to scout a goalie that's not 6'2" or higher.
No, it's
like,
not going to happen.
How tall's Martin Brodeur?
Marty's, he might be 6.
Right, you know what I mean? Like, if I just look at that, and I'm like, so this might be the best goaltender of all time. Is 6 feet tall, and you wouldn't be allowed to scout him now? Like, I just don't know. Like, I of course I understand that size is an advantage, but I don't think it can be the only determining factor. You know, especially me with sitting here with a young goalie, like a small goalie potentially too. I just don't think that's. It just sort of sucks, right? If it's really going that far that way, that you have to be big to be.
But it really is. But it really is going that far. Like if you look right now in the league, I think there's one goalie that's 6 feet. Like other than that, you're looking at your average goalie now is 6'4".
Yeah, it might be the biggest player in your team in a lot of scenarios.
Like, could you imagine that your goalie that you were looking up at your goalie all the time?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Look how many guys are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". Right?
Yeah.
That you used to beg for a defenseman that size.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. There's one guy in Russia. I don't know if you still follow sports at all, but he's doing amazingly well, and they're thinking that he might be able to make the jump over. I guess like kind of winning the best goalie over there a few years in a row, and he's 5'10". So
really?
Yeah, a little bit outside the mold for this modern era. And I was actually really curious because I would like to see him come over and see, because you know what? I do think it only takes one or two, you know, like to be able to compete and really perform well, where it's like, you know, because it's a copycat league. Not saying that everyone's going to want a 5'10" goalie, but, you know, look at like what St. Louis did last year, right? Like big, strong, you know, everyone's tried to get a little bit big, stronger, right? Okay, that's what wins the cup. I mean, I think if you get a goalie in there that can perform at 5'10", it might open the door for a few other guys that could have a chance. But he said right now it's like 6 foot plus and then some. And the less you have to move, the easier it is for you. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. And like you said, it is a bit of a copycat league where if one you know, Goudreau comes in and all of a sudden Johnny Hockey is, you know, at 5 foot fuck all or whatever he is. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, now we all got to go and get small guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It opens the door for some of these guys. But let's go. Okay. So Kamloops, so you get to go to the Memorial Cup, win the damn thing. And you went from a scenario, just walk me through that year, because you were splitting with Rod Branch pretty much for most of the year. It looked like as far as regular season was concerned, and then you were given the reins in playoffs. Did you kind of earn the reins in playoffs, or am I getting this wrong? And you guys didn't really have that scenario?
I got the reason Rod played so many games that year is I got injured twice.
Oh, okay.
I ended up blowing my knee out twice that year. So that's, you know, Rod Branch stepped in when I was hurt, did an incredible job, carried the team, and was really a big reason why we were as successful as we were, and we had the record we did. And then I was healthy back when playoffs started, and then just took over from there. And it's funny because I remember we were in the Memorial Cup. We'd won the first couple games, and it was a given that we were in the finals. And I remember I went up to Don Hay, and just to give you an idea of sort of the mentality, and I went up to Hazer and I'm like, hey, give Brancher a game. He's one of the reasons we got here, right? Because he carried us when I was injured. I'm like, give him a game in the Memorial Cup. Like he's earned it. And Hazer's like, not a chance. He goes, we are not going to, he goes, I can't show the team that we're going to let off the gas for a second. He goes, because it's such a short, he'd been there before, right? I never had. Yeah. And he's just like, he goes, if we show the team that we're letting off, he goes, we can't just turn it back on again.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we ended up winning that game 5-0.
Right. Well, good for you though to go to bat for him, and who knows what would. That's the thing too, right? That turns out to be like looking like that was the right decision by Don Hay, but it might have been the right decision to start Branch too. I mean, maybe it would have been 5-0, and you go back in the net and you win, right?
But it also might have, you know what? You never know. It might have lost us the goddamn tournament too.
Yeah. Who knows, right? Exactly. I mean, right now it looks like it was totally correct. How was that? How was that? I mean, I saw you won the playoff MVP there for the WHL. So obviously you were strutting your stuff there, going in with a lot of confidence, I assume, into the Memorial Cup. But that's such a weird scenario because I mean we were a couple games away from going ourselves in Spokane, but I can imagine like stepping in there and playing somebody from the OHL or the Q. I mean, you've never seen these leagues or these teams before, heard of the players, but that's such a short tournament. I just think it'd be such an interesting thing to be a part of.
Well, that's why they say it's the hardest. It's the actual hardest trophy to win is, I think, because you battle through your own league, and we all know how hard that is. And just to win that, and then all of a sudden you go there and you're like, all right, so if you lose, you're screwed, right? Like it's, you got 4 games. That's it. So it was neat playing against them. It's definitely surreal. But it's not such a grind. And like I said, our team we knew we were going to win. Like it wasn't cocky. It was just, you just had that feeling like we're somehow going to pull this off.
Yeah.
And we did, we went in there, we went undefeated for the tournament. Even they scored kind of, they got close in the final game. But again, nobody panicked. It was just like, oh, we're going to win, so we'll figure it out.
Was there anyone there outside of your team that like was impressive to you that you felt was a pretty big deal?
Well, it was funny because North Bay, we were pissed off at North Bay because they ended up, remember that, what was it, the tip-top rankings? Mm-hmm. Right, the top 10 tip-top rankings or whatever. So you actually got everybody on the team, if you were ranked number 1 at the end of the year, got $100 gift card to Tip-Top Tailors. And they stole our ranking at the end of the year. We were actually number 2 and they were number 1. So we were pissed off at them, and we beat them 5-0, I think, in the only game we faced them. They were the favorites going in, and we were basically with a little bit of a screw you attitude, and ended up shellacking them 5-0.
That's sweet.
The tip-top.
Tip-top. We were actually number 1 the year that we almost went there. Like I said, in CHL, we were number 1 ranked team in CHL. We ended up losing to Brandon, who I think was like 4 in the WHL final or something. So we never got to the Memorial Cup, unfortunately. But it's fun to watch those. I mean, when you're a part of that, and of course it's completely subjective and arbitrary, and who really knows, right? But it's always nice to see your team up there rolling around. Well, I want to ask you a couple questions about Kamloops, because you had your Memorial Cup team had a future Hall of Famer in Jerome McGinley as a 16-year-old who scored a grand total of 6 goals as a 16-year-old that season. He played 48 games. I mean, obviously another maybe Hall of Famer in Shane Doan was there at 16. He had 24 that year. Goals I'm talking about. Darcy Tucker was on that team. You definitely had a lot of future NHLers and some again, legacy type players. Did you see, looking back now, did you see somebody like Jerome or Doner like going on to NHL careers like that?
Yeah, you really did. They were, they came in at Iggy came in at 16, and we gave him a pretty hard time, but you just looked at him, you knew the kid was going to be pretty good. He was going to turn out all right. I mean, if you look down our lineup, that was a pretty solid lineup. I think a lot of guys went on and had some pretty good careers, but I think one of the biggest things, it was just the culture. And a lot of people say culture of a team and stuff, but it's legit. And I think when you go from where I went from Victoria, and then you see the difference in the culture in Kamloops, you definitely see why organizations are successful. and certain organizations aren't. And it's built from the top down. And like you said, it's you were in Spokane that had a pretty good. You guys were pretty good there for quite a few years too, and it's just a different feeling. It's just a different mindset and mentality when you show up to the rink. It's just everything from the top down is different.
Yeah. No, and it totally matters. And I mean, it's that whole elusive thing you said, like culture is this, it's a big word that everyone's searching for. And if you can bottle it, I mean, you got something, and it's teams don't have it in the NHL, right? I mean, the best league in the world, there's lots of teams that don't have it and everyone's trying to find it, right? Like that's the crazy thing. But when you're in it and around it, it's a powerful thing because there also means, so there's guys in your team that were really good and turned out to be really good, but maybe that elevated them to a little different level. You know what I mean? Like that scenario.
I think it did. I think it taught it taught the Shane Doans and the Jerome McGinley's how to be leaders. It taught them. I think if you talk to them, I think it was a big springboard to their careers, and it taught them a lot of things that carried them a long way. Like if you meet those two guys, they're just good people, right? Like they're people you want to be around, you want to surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. But I think. I don't want to say that it taught them that, but I think it probably laid a pretty good foundation for them when they were younger. The older guys instilled certain things in them that went on to help their career for sure.
100%. Well, I just think it's interesting too because 16. He had 6 goals, right? I mean, like, and even at his draft year, I mean, I had 36 at 16, right? You know what I mean? Like, does that mean that I was better than him then? Maybe, right? And obviously it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But it's like people get really wrapped up too, like where they are in the moment. And it's interesting to see like how somebody progresses because, I've had an opportunity to think about Jerome a little bit. One, I see him at the rink. Actually, he's local here in town. So I've had a chance to BS with him a little bit. And we shared a gold medal at World Junior together. And he was like a peer of mine, right? So it's interesting to compare like the massive change. I mean, difference in careers, right? Like his versus mine and like where things changed. But even with him, like he was 11th overall, which is nothing to shake a stick at, right? But like some people thought there was 10 better players than him when he was drafted. Do you know what I mean? And like he went on to an Art Ross and he went on to Maurice Richard and he almost took his team to the Stanley Cup final and like is a Hall of Famer now. So it's like, I really love like bearing witness to that evolution, right? Like that it's crazy, that it's a process. And I think that he somehow committed to this process of getting better, like really getting better, right? Like trying to improve, not just because it happened, but because he actually willed it to happen. And I think there's something to be said for that.
Well, I think a lot of those guys, 11th overall, that's no, because I was 196th.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Right. I was drafted in a round that they don't have anymore. Right? Yeah. But you look at guys like that, and like you said, he was constantly pushing himself. So it's funny, we talked about it earlier, where are you gauging yourself on other people? I think he was one of those players that always just pushed himself to be better than he was. Right. It wasn't about the other centerman or this or that. He was just going to better himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
I don't know who was first overall that year.
Again, I mean, that's the one that had Terry Ryan in it. That was the one that had Damon Lankow in it at 4.
Damon Lankow was 4?
Damon Lankow went 4. Yep. Weimer was like no, that was a different one.
Would you take Damon Lankow or would you take Iggy?
Well, there you go. I mean, and Damon had a great NHL career, but I mean, he didn't win a scoring title. You know what I mean?
Don't get me wrong.
He didn't win a scoring title. So yeah, no, I mean, that was just a really cool team. Like that space and time for Kamloops was really part of the lore, right? That they still kind of carry now. I mean, it started before with the Rob Browns and the Hogoods and the Szajkowskis, and then it came into that era of the Niedermeyer and Darcy Tucker and like the winning. Yeah, right. Sidor and you mean yourself as part of that storyline too. Is just a really impressive time where they were just producing NHLer after NHLer, and to go through it then is pretty wild stuff. Which brings an interesting question to me. So like, Steve Passmore, who ends up playing 90 games in the NHL, and we're there for a lot more than that because of your role as being the backup. To win that MVP award in the playoffs and to win a Memorial Cup and to do these things. Like, do you feel that there was more for you out there? Like, could you have taken a bigger bite of the apple, or do you think that you kind of got what you could out of the lemon? That's you.
It's funny, what I was thinking about that the other day. I was just watching, and and I still find it funny that I actually did end up playing in the NHL. That was always the goal, but the fact that it happened was I still sometimes look back and go, did that really, so I don't know. I'd love to say that I should have been a starter, and I could have gone on and I should have played 1,000 games and I should have done this, but I think I can actually look at it realistically, at peace with my career and go, yeah, you know what? I probably did milk the most I could out of, being a fat 5'9" kid. And, I think I probably did get the most out of my career I could have. And I think I can sleep at night saying that. Like, I think being a starter was always the dream and what I should have done, but I was a starter in the minors. I went to the Calder Cup finals. I think, I think I probably topped my career out pretty much as much as I could have, I think.
That's a comfortable place to be in for sure, and regret shouldn't even exist really. Like, it is what it is. And if there was something, it's just like learn from it and apply it moving forward.
But like you said, we're all competitive. If Jason Podolin can look himself in the mirror and go, yeah, I had a fucking hell of a career, and be proud of it and not think, what if, because I think in hockey, and I think what a lot of people don't understand is a lot of our careers, and guys can bullshit you all they want. A lot of our careers is about timing, being in the right place at the right time. And that means, if Jason Podolin was in LA at a different time, or maybe if he was in Carolina instead of LA at that time, when they needed this winger to do that, you could have had 10 years in the show and never batted an eye because you were just in the right place at the right time. And I think a lot of people really downplay that. But I think if we were honest with each other, I think it's true. Unfortunately, there's guys that went on and had a career because they were in the right place. All of a sudden, they've got a job in the NHL, and next thing you know, you're like, well, shit, the guy's been here 10 years. Might as well keep him.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're right. We've had guys talk about that. Just the environment that you're even drafted in, right? Like, do they need that defenseman? Do they have anyone there to fill that spot? And if they don't, then they're going to allow you to make those mistakes as a 19, 20-year-old, again and again and again, because you're going to be there. Whereas if you're in a team that, they have 4 or 5 guys waiting in the wings and you make that one spot, you might be down, right? So it doesn't mean that you're maybe not ready. You're just not ready right then for that team. And then maybe that other team doesn't come along. There is definitely that aspect to it. There is a luck. There is an organizational aspect to it. Obviously I try to promote, and I'm sure you do too, is the accountability to the player, like what could we have done, or what can you do in the moment, right? To best, maximize your ability to take advantage of the opportunity or to create another opportunity, right? You want to feel empowered. You don't want to feel disempowered by your scenario, but there is some times where you are disempowered. The truth of the matter is you're not in control of some of these things that go on, or where you get drafted, or who the coach is, or, who's ahead of you in the lineup, or any of that stuff, right?
I had a coach once tell me, he's like, don't ever try and figure out the hockey game out. Or he said, you'll be in a padded cell with a jacket on. He's like, don't try and figure it out. Don't ask. Don't keep looking at, because so we played in the minors quite a bit. Let's call a spade. And how many times did you look at the transaction sheet and so got called up, and the first reaction in the dressing room, holy shit, are you kidding me? He got called up? Like, he's fucking terrible. Yeah. Right? And you got to admit, in the minors, that was a mindset that was almost detrimental. And because you would look at the transactions and go, who got called up? No way. He got called up. He's terrible.
Oh yeah.
And
especially when you're playing well too, man. Like I can relate to that. You mean that year I was leading the AHL in goals at 22 or whatever. It's like, and you'd see these guys and these other teams get called up, and you're stuck out in Newfoundland on the Rock, going like, when is my phone going to ring? Like, what's going on here? Like, doesn't make sense. But again, what can you control? You can't control it.
But it's literally cancerous when you're in the minors and you're watching that transaction sheet and you're just going, like you said, you're out in the Rock and you're playing your ass off and you feel like you're a million miles from nowhere. Yeah. Right. We were stuck in Cape Breton, and I remember getting called up a couple times, getting to the arena or getting to the airport and them going, just kidding, turn around, go back.
What?
Oh yeah.
How did that? What do you mean? Just kidding. What does that mean?
It means you're too far away. Like by the time they needed you, they're like, oh yeah, shit, can't use you now. Or, right. So-and-so thought he was hurt and now he's okay. Oh, that happened. I think that happened in Cape twice. And then it even happened in Hamilton.
Right.
You'd be literally on your way to the airport and they're like, yeah, just turn around, forget it. Just unpack your gear.
Right.
Like the emotional roller coasters we went through in the minors, I don't think people quite understand how tough that is to be that close to where you want to be. Yeah. And you're working your balls off to get there, and they keep dangling that carrot and then they pull it away and then they dangle the carrot again. And you're always right there.
Well, and how about the difference? Like the part that blew me away was legitimately what a phone call, like the impact a phone call can make, because Steve Passmore, the starting goalie in Hamilton, is the exact same guy who's like the backup goalie in Chicago, yet you're all of a sudden worth a hell of a lot more. You're getting treated a hell of a lot differently. The schedules, your whole life is so much different with a phone call. And it's like, that's just so crazy to me, like how that is, because it's vastly two different worlds, playing in the minors or playing in the NHL. It's not even close.
No, and it's so funny, like you said, though, it's so funny how the different your role is. Like everything's different. Jason Podolin on the Rock, who's leading the team in scoring. Well, when you go up, you're a fourth liner, and you better eat some minutes, and you're going to get about 5 shifts.
Yeah,
just don't get scored on, right?
Yeah.
We're not looking at you to produce. We don't care. We don't expect a point out of you. We don't expect shit.
No, that was the best. I got to stop you there, because then they would send you down and say, well, you didn't produce, so go back down there and get her done. And it's like, yeah, well, I got 5 shifts a game. Thanks.
And you stuck me with the 2 tough guys, right?
Yeah.
And you're wondering why we didn't light it up.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I know. It's funny.
It is. I think people forget about the minors and how tough it actually is to be in the minors.
Yeah, and I think they're doing a good thing now with the league as far as trying to get teams closer to the parent club, because like what you just talked about there, that happened all the time. And you talk about opportunity, right? Like it might be that they're calling you up for that one game because so and so has a bad shoulder, but that could be your game. Like you don't know, right? That could be your 2-goal game, and now you know what, you bought yourself in a week, and now, but like every time you take away that one opportunity, whether it's a game or 2, that's the less chance to get to where you want to go. And I definitely felt that in the Rock. And actually, Nathan Dempsey, my last guest, we were talking about that. We were not only were you isolated in the Rock, like for real, right? Like there was no one there watching you ever, right? Like unless there was someone from Toronto, there was no scouts there, and it was a hard place to get off of. So like, there was no like token call ups. Let's come up and we'll get this guy a little look. Like it was, that this didn't happen. So the fact that the teams are moving away from that, and that the Marlies are now in Toronto. As great as Newfoundland was, and how great it was, like with the fans and everything else, like as far as becoming an NHLer, I think it's better for those guys to be closer to the parent club. You feel more a part of it, and it's easier access.
But the easier access is a big thing. Like you said, like somebody goes down in pregame skate, let's get Pods a call, and let's have him dressed tonight. And like you said, you never know when your break is. And you get lucky, somebody else goes down, somebody loses a skate, whatever, and you never know. But if you're on the Rock, or like we were in the Cape, it's an actual process to get called up, and it's a 2-day trip.
Yeah.
Right?
This is planned out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We actually, I don't know if you remember, I was going through, and because my first, my rookie year there was the year you guys went to the finals in Hamilton. So I got traded to Toronto that year. I ended up playing on 4 different teams that year, which I know you can relate to, because I got sent down from Toronto for playoffs with the Baby Leafs. So, and I didn't know any of those guys there. And I mean, we essentially just started playoffs, right? So we beat, I can't remember who we won. We beat somebody in that first 5 best of 5 series. And then we played you in the second round, and we lost in Game 7. We lost overtime in Game 6, and then we lost in Game 7. You guys went on to go all the way. Do you remember anything about that series? I mean, that was your run, and like I'm completely a blank slate on it, because I think I was just in a blur. Like that whole year for me was kind of a blur. Do you remember anything from that series, like that overtime game or any of that?
Well, I do actually, because it was funny that year. We ended up. That was the year I was actually injured. They were trying to figure out what was wrong with my muscles and shit like that. So I came back. We made the playoffs by 2 points that year.
Right.
Like we had to win the last game, and we made the playoffs by 2 points. And we went to Game 7 every round. Like we went to the final game every round. And I remember we were there because who was I shooting the shit with? Might have been even Demper. He would have been there. And yeah, it was we just had a run. Like it was just a fun run. And like I said, we took you guys, it was playoffs or overtime in Game 6, which, crowd goes nuts. And then Game 7, we pulled it out. I think it was by 1 goal in Game 7 too. It was tight.
Yeah.
And then we kept rolling.
Right. That's a fun run. Hey, I mean, getting there, we got to the finals once with Bridgeport, got to the finals against Chicago, and that didn't go well. Chicago took us out. But I mean, anytime you can go deep like that, like I'm sure you remember, I mean, so many guys in that team, and it's such a galvanizing thing to be a part of, whether you win a Memorial Cup or whether you go to a final. I think it's a pretty special thing.
It is, and it's a grind, and it's an emotional roller coaster. You ride the highs, you trying to forget about the lows, and we ended up losing to Hershey that year. I think we lost in 5, but yeah, it was those runs are fun, and like you said, you get some pretty good friends out of that you never forget. And it's funny when your teams are successful, you usually have a really tight group.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
When you're not successful, you don't remember the guys you played with on the shit teams.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, you're going your separate ways after practice. You're not together on the road. You're not. Well, there's nothing really to bring you together either, right? I mean, like that adversity and winning games and like doing special stuff. I mean, that brings guys together, and that's what memories are kind of made of. And that's probably why you remember that season a heck of a lot more than I do. I wasn't able to build relationships with anyone there like that first year. I didn't know anyone, right? Yeah. And a series and a half isn't really that memorable, in the whole scheme of things at the end of a long career. So. You're 100% right. Not that there wasn't good guys on that team. I know there was great guys on that team, but it's just you're not together long enough to remember it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Go back to the goalie stuff. Did you mentioned the goalies are kind of recognized as being a little bit different breed within a sport. I've said on here before, and I think you knew that I bought some goalie equipment after I was done, and I've been on the ice a few times, and it continuously blows my mind, even when I'm out there, that you are realistically and seriously playing a different game than everyone else is. Like it's a completely different sport. I mean, D and forward is pretty, like goalie is just different. Like it's completely different. You have a different job than everybody else. What you're expected to do is different than everybody else. What your reads are is different than everybody else. Which makes sense that now that you have a different personality filling that role too, is I guess what my transition is, that it draws kind of a different personality type. Did you, and it's also really recognized and remembered as superstitious and very routine oriented. A lot of times goaltenders are. Did you have any yourself that you'd want to share that you thought were maybe a little little crazy, or did you ever play with anybody that you could tell one of their stories of some of these superstitious or pregame routines that would be entertaining?
I think I'd like to say that I wasn't superstitious, that I had routines. I think routines and superstitions are very different things. Superstition means you think that the game's going to go to shit if you don't do certain things. Whereas I just did the same things over and over and over. It's just a routine. No, I used to touch the posts the same way. Used to have the same routine for the anthem, stuff like that. So I don't know. I like to say I wasn't superstitious, but I probably was.
Right. Did you see? I don't know if you've been following the playoffs at all, but Lundqvist. They showed a clip of Lundqvist coming on the ice for Game 1 and Lundqvist coming on the ice for Game 2 for warm up. And like the first, whatever it was, 15 seconds of him being on the ice was, you would have thought it was like a repeat. Well, they actually they side cut it, right? So like he came up, he touched the post. He does like two hip flexor stretches. He does a couple of these. He grabs a puck. He shoots top shelf, right? Like it was choreographed, like exactly the same. And I mean, I assume he's been doing that for probably 15 years, and that's why it's so entrenched. But I'd be curious to see if you'd follow other guys, if there's that many guys that would do the same thing in the other positions.
I don't know, but I mean, were you the same for every warm up? Like, did you do the same things?
I did. I had a routine with the goalie after warm up or before a game all the time. Like the way I would touch his pads would be the last one after the kind of like the group huddle. Like to do, I always sort of had, a routine, I guess, when it came to that. I wasn't one much of like, I had to have my left skate on first, or I have to do this or do this a certain way. But I was probably routine oriented, you know what I mean? Like for sure.
Or I think you get into that's just what's comfortable. Right. And, so it wasn't like, I don't think I'd go in the corner and cry if I didn't get to do certain things in my warm up, but that's, you get used to doing it certain ways. So,
but that's where it gets into trouble, don't you think? Is like when guys get so, religious about what I would call. I mean, I think when it starts to own you, like that's when it's not a routine. That is superstition. Like if you did forget to put something, or you didn't tap your post the right way, and now you're thinking about the fact that you didn't tap your post the right way, and like, oh my gosh, now what's going to happen, right? Like that's when it can get a little bit tricky.
and I think there's definitely guys that's where it goes into a dark place for them, instead of being this is just what I do and this is how I get ready. It does, if they go into a dark place, like, oh, who touched my stick? Why is my stick going?
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure you played with guys like that.
Yeah. Well, I talk to my players about that now too. Actually, I wrote something online the other day. Is like, I think as an athlete, it's a way that we kind of can control the situation or control the environment, right? Like it's having the routine or a superstition. But as soon as that superstition starts to control you, like that's ironically when you've gone too far, because you're not accomplishing what the initial idea was behind it in the first place, right? This is what I do before a game. This is when I stretch. This is how I put my equipment on. This is the time I do it. Like all that stuff is kind of to get it so you're not trying to reinvent it every time you get into a routine that makes sense. But when that starts to become very, let's say structured or itemized, or I mean the like Serrano in Major League with the chicken.
Should have got live chicken.
I love that's when you can get into trouble. But okay, that's cool that you weren't. Anyone that was like that? Any tenders that you were with that were kind of crazy?
Jamie Storr.
Yeah.
Oh my God! In between periods, used to lie on his back with his feet up on the bench, and close his eyes and go through, and he would mimic making saves. And it was just. It was bizarre, but that's what he would do in between periods. And I remember I just got there, and Schneider was there as D-man, and I remember he was a guy that just loved to have fun, right? Yeah. And so Schneider is there, and he's watching Storzy on the doing all his, and he would like sit there and go boom 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 boom, and he was doing all these mimics. So remember. Schneider's sitting there watching him, and then Storzy gets up. Schneider looks at him and goes, if you get that many shots in this period, we're fucked anyway. But Stewart, that was Jamie Stewart's thing in between periods, and that was his superstition. He'd have to do it.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a little bit ahead of his time too. I mean, goalies are making a little more making visualization a bigger part of their pregame routines now. I've been watching some of the goalies, and a lot of guys are getting into, having that, incorporating that, the actual closing of the eyes and pretending to making saves. But yeah, Sturgis was a little bit out there. He was there when I was there too in LA, and he was kind of the typical goalie. He was just sort of a little bit, just in a little different place than everybody else, just on a regular spot.
Sure. And like you said, especially game days, like, you don't talk to him. Yeah. He couldn't have fun. He's funny. He was the one that it was in LA when I got all those starts, and he was the one sitting beside me, and he's like, "Can't believe they want me to be the starter, and they're giving somebody you all the starts and all this." And I'm like, and I was sitting there and just like, you can complain to anybody else, but not me.
You want me to be empathetic to you, partner? But probably not going to work.
I'm sorry, you first rounder that's had everything handed to you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let me, like, this is like, I'm starting my 5th game, and this is the first time I'd ever come to the rink in the NHL where I just knew I was starting. Like, that was the first time I'd ever have that thought. Usually it's like, I don't know. This is the first time I was coming to the rink, and he's just bitching me out how bad he's got it. I was just like, I remember going back to my hotel where I'm living, right?
Yeah.
Thinking, really? Huh. All right.
Yeah.
And he wasn't
bad. Hotel. I love that, living in the hotel. You did, like, with Chicago, you had a place, right? Like, because you were there. Yeah. So you got the top to go get a place. And I never did have that. That would have been nice. But at least you were able to call Chicago home for a few years there, even though you're up and down in some of the other spots.
Yeah, it was good. You know what? The best get a place story I've got, and you had Kevin Sawyer on here. So that was, I won't lie to you, that was the first time I've ever teared up when a guy got told to get a place. We ended up we were in Anaheim, and they were out there for pregame skate. And so Kevin and I grew up together. We're the only 2 people from Grand Forks to ever make the NHL, and we played the same team together. We definitely both had different paths to get there, but I remember we go to Anaheim, and he's out there, and he's a black ace. He's out there skating after and everybody, and he comes up to me, and he's got a grin about this big. And he's just got this huge, stupid. I'm like, "Hey, Soisy, how you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. And he's just smiling like an idiot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What's going on?" He's like, "They told me to get a place today." Like, you've never seen anybody so happy in their life. And that is a huge thing when you're a bubble player in the NHL and they tell you to get a place. Like, that's a you made it, a euphoric you made it moment, right?
Yeah. That is the you made it moment. Like, that's when you know that they think that you're supposed to be there, man. And like, I can just see Soisy. I mean, he's so authentic, right? And so genuine. And like, I could just see like him just wearing that right on his sleeve and just being absolutely enamored by it.
Idiot grin you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And he's just like, "They told me to get a place." I was like, holy shit. Like, I actually teared up at the time, because I was like, I knew how hard he'd worked to get there. I knew how many times he'd gone up and down Rokoff's Hill, and how hard how much time and effort he put in. It just felt awesome for him.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Did you, well, maybe my last 2 questions here. One is, you were around a lot of great players. Like we talked about, even back in junior, and then again in the NHL. Your teams in Chicago there. I mean, McCabe was there, and Amonte and Gilmore, and Probert was on that team, and Robitaille you got to play with in LA, and I mean, obviously some big names. Was there anyone that stood out to you as just either as a person or as a leader that that you just would like to share, and was kind of a memorable experience for you?
You know what? There were a few guys that were really good to be around, and like you said, just good people. Tony Amonte was awesome. Really liked him. He was one of those guys that made sure that everybody felt included. Which was pretty cool. Luc Robitaille, actually, it was funny. I had to use his influence in LA. I wanted to go take my wife out to dinner at Morton's in Hollywood when I was there for my birthday. And he actually had to call and give me reservations because they wouldn't talk to me. Right. That's such an LA thing. It's like, you play for who? The Kings? Yeah, we don't know them.
Right.
Yeah. What show have you been on? No, yeah. I don't know. But then Dougie Waite in LA or in Edmonton, Dougie Waite was awesome too. Gilmore was good. Like, just a lot of guys there. You know what? There was a lot of, they're just good dudes.
Yeah.
You know, I remember Dougie Waite, my first NHL game ever. I get called up, and so we're sitting there getting dressed before the game, and we're across I'm on one side of the dressing room. He's literally across the room on the other side, and all the boys are in there. We're getting dressed, and he just yells across. He's like, "Hey, Passy," and I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Is this your first game?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, whatever you do, don't shit the bed tonight." I'm just like, "Thanks, that's awesome," because I wasn't scared already.
Right.
But I got Dougie Waite yelling across the room telling me not to shit the bed.
Right.
Oh, so it's
positive reinforcement, but obviously meant in a kind and in a way to sort of hopefully break the tension for you.
He did, and it was funny because he came up to me after the game and he's like, "Sorry, dude." He goes, "Somebody did that to me my first game," and he goes, "I just found it took all the weight off my shoulders," and because the whole room laughed, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, "Somebody did that to me, so he goes, I do that to everybody that comes up." Right, just those good things those guys that he was probably one of the better leaders out there.
That's cool. Do you have any last question here? Do you have any advice for whether it be players or young goalies out there? Anything that you learned, from your time of, the long time that you played? Anything that you would like to let somebody else know? If you could tell them one thing.
No, I think we touched on a lot of it today. Is don't take yourself too seriously. The game will beat you up if you let it. It really will. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, emotionals, like emotionally, whether it's getting called up, whether it's getting cut from this team, and it doesn't matter whether it's your peewee team or whether it's junior, what it is, right? Like this career, the game's tough. Don't make it any tougher than it has to be, right? Like, and don't overthink it. Get out of your own head, and just have fun. Like that's, and I think, you and I played together. We both had, had careers that the paths went all over the map, like everywhere from the NHL to playing in Europe to it went everywhere. But I think we had fun. Maybe we could have had a little more fun or maybe a little less. But that's the big thing that I tell all the kids when I'm talking to them is, just you got to ride the roller coaster and don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good advice. And I had Dusty Emu on, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that name or not. Yeah, he was a goaltending coach there for Winnipeg and LA as well, and that was one of the things that he said that when he works with guys, I mean, obviously everyone's different. He's quick to say that, but he's like, a lot of times we get caught, especially as goalies. So he said players for sure is too, but like as being really, really committed to the results, like, and being so focused on that you completely lose track of who you are, one as a person and why you're playing the damn thing, to begin with. Right. And he's like, when we can, what he hopes to, when he works with guys, is that they can just stay connected to that spot of like fun, why they're there, like why they started. Yeah, because I mean, the wins and losses are going to come, and that's just going to happen. But if you can identify and keep real, like why you got the skates on, that's going to keep you around, and that's going to keep you like fighting through that adversity, and at the end of the day, give you better results too, which is what we all want.
Well, I think the big thing is you got to remember at the end of the day, you and I both got paid to play a kid's game for a living.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kid's game. Enjoy it. And I think the more that the guys actually enjoy it, I think the longer they're going to actually have a career, because you're not going to burn out. You're not going to hate the game. I've only played with one player ever that hated hockey, like legit hated the game. Had more skill in his shit than I have in my body.
Yeah.
But he hated hockey. He hated showing up to the rink every day.
Yeah.
And you know what? He didn't have a very long career. You know, and those, I think the more you can enjoy it and remember that it's a kid's game and remember why you enjoy showing up to the rink every day, I think you'll actually probably be better off in the long run and have a longer career than you would have if you look at it as just a job.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great way to leave it, because that is, Passy, I think that's a testament to you and your career and how you remembered by me as a teammate, as a guy that had a good time, a guy that made it fun for others, and maybe I'll close with that one story. And I've told Gunnar, that's my goalie son, a few times, was when you would take in the horseshoe there, or the half circle, Passy would do this thing where he would reenact goalies of the past, and so he would do Hasek for 5 shots, then he'd do Brodeur, and then he would do Tony Esposito, and anyways, it is so funny and so hilarious, and it's just stuff like that. I mean, like that's I don't remember your cutouts in Mannheim, you know what I mean? But I remember you doing that. I remember fun that we'd have playing rebound game at the end, and I think that's a test of what you're saying, right? I mean, that's why we're playing the game, right? Of course, we wanted to score the goals and get the wins and win the trophies and earn the checks. But at the end of the day, like you said, when you're old and fat, like I remember that stuff, and that brings a smile to my face. And I remember that about you and the guys that I played with. So thank you for that. Thanks for showing up today, dude. I really appreciate your time, and throwing that goalie mask on was a great way to So hopefully the viewers here enjoyed it as much as I did, but I really appreciate you coming out today, Passy.
All right, dude. Have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, man.
See you, bud.
Hey there. Thank you so much for listening today to my conversation with Steve Passmore. And for me, my biggest takeaway from the whole conversation, other than what a great guy Steve is, and just reminding me of how much fun we had back when we were playing together in Mannheim, and how much fun it was playing against him when he was with the Blazers. But for me, it was about fun. Like, that's just the backbone of what everything should be about. For those of you who listen to the episode with Steve Kelly, Steve mentioned fun. It seems to be a common theme lately, and I think it's one that's disregarded, especially the higher up the ranks we get. Coaches and parents are usually the first ones to say to their kid in youth hockey as they go out to the rink, have fun out there, play hard and have fun. So it's a message that gets sent, but all too often gets lost as we move up the ranks and as things get a little more serious and a little more competitive, that we become very serious about this thing. And of course, it's important to us. Just because something's important to you doesn't mean it has to be serious, and it has to be structured, and we have to be very stoic about things, right? We have to remember that this is a game that we are playing, that it's a sport, and to play a sport, sometimes that requires a little bit of a free, fun-loving attitude and mindset that goes along with that. There is going to be struggles with whatever it is that we do, whether that's being a hockey player, whether that's with being a teacher or a fighter or a policewoman or man. There's going to be trouble, right? And there's going to be hard days, and there's going to be things that don't go right, but it's how we can embrace and support and really treasure the fun aspect and finding ways to make it fun, to keep things fun, because that's what it is all about, right? It's the experience of what we're doing here. And I think to all you hockey players out there, find what you love within hockey and embrace that, right? And celebrate that. Have fun with the relationships that you're making. Have fun with the sport that you're playing. And when we're having fun, one, you're making other people better. You're a good person to be around, but you're also making light of things that can be serious, like results. Of course we want results, but if we're so focused on being perfect and playing the perfect game and never making mistakes, that's not a very fun-loving environment to be in. So remind yourself when you make that mistake in practice and you get discouraged that, hey, it's supposed to be fun. Let's be fun here. And it's a good message to send, because I know it really works for a lot of my clients, some of these guys that that are really serious and are really driven and really want to be their best and step into their potential, that they have to be reminded that, you know what, this pursuit, this journey should be a fun one. So that's the message of today. Make it fun. Thank you, Steve, for sharing that with us. And till next time, play hard and keep your head up.